Please welcome to the stage Vice Chair of the Clinton Foundation, Chelsea Clinton.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is just afternoon. I am so thrilled to be here with all of you today, and I'm so grateful that all of you are spending this beautiful fall day with all of us here, both so that you can meet each other, work with each other, get to know each other, kind of find areas of common purpose and cause and commitment, pun intended. Oh yeah, thank you. A few laughs. Oh, and then more laughs, thank you. But I also hope you will tell us kind of what more we can do to help make CGIU as a network more kind of robust and productive and maybe full of more laughter for all of you. So please continue to give us feedback. And I'm really grateful, especially to all of our panelists for being kind of with us today and looking forward to our conversation. Both of my older two children are sick. So I'm not going to shake any hands or hug anyone. But if you still get sick over the next week, you can absolutely blame Charlotte and Aiden because they are little walking petri dishes, as I'm sure every parent of young children in the room can empathize with. Yes, some of you are nodding at me. So don't blame your own children if you get sick this week. Blame mine. I say with great love and affection. So really, I just am excited to get us started kind of this afternoon with the kind of second part of the day, and I'm so grateful again to our panelists. So I'd like to ask them to join me on stage. Ashifi, Gogo, is up first. I don't know where he's coming from. Oh, there he is. Oh yes, please, applaud, applaud. Well, I think I first met a decade ago, which is just extraordinary given all that he has done kind of in the decade since. Derrius Quarles, who I think is up next, and now I know is appearing from this side. Oh, yeah, Derrius, you have your own cheering contingent. Suhani, Jalota, who I had the pleasure of interviewing for our Clinton Foundation podcast. So I'm incredibly grateful that she continues to engage with us. And Kristin Duquette. So please give Kristin a round of applause. And while she comes up to the stage, I'm going to take my seat. So thank you all again for being with us. And I thought we would start sort of at the beginning, because it's a very good place to start. And Ashifi, since you're sitting next to me, I'm going to start with you. Can you talk a little bit about kind of where the idea for Sproxil came from and kind of how that idea has evolved as you recognized kind of the needs were evolving and that it could be even more powerful than what you'd first conceived?
Great, thanks, Chelsea. That's an excellent question. I was a grad student at Dartmouth, and the town of Hanover had kicked out all the big box retail stores. And so if you wanted to buy a tomato, you had to buy a highly organic tomato from the co-op and pay a pretty penny for that. And as a graduate student, I would have done with, I guess, an inorganic tomato. But I couldn't really do that. And so instead of trying to get a regular tomato, I figured, how can I get more value out of the purchase experience? You know, if I could know this tomato was picked yesterday, maybe I'll feel happier paying a premium. So the concept of traceability and being able to get more information about the products you're buying started there. And applied to a couple of business plan competitions and won a bunch of awards. And it turns out we got zero market traction. Nobody cared if their tomato was super organic or not, because when they walked into a store like a Whole Foods, they already trusted that the work had already been done for them. So we needed a market that had more skeptical consumers. And so looking at the pharmaceutical supply chain in overseas markets, where unfortunately around that time in Nigeria, 80 infants had lost their lives from teething syrup that was tainted with chemicals found in antifreeze. We were a hammer looking for a nail, and that ended up being our nail. So teaming up with the governments there and launching our services, roughly 10 years ago, actually, we've been able to grow profitably to cover 2.4 billion products worldwide today. And so it's been an incredible journey, and we're quite honored to be here today.
Oh yes, please. Applaud frequently, because they're all remarkable and deserve your approbation. Suhani, had the real pleasure of listening to you talk about your journey with Myna in our conversation on Why Am I Telling You This, the Foundation's podcast. And I really can't wait to hear it again. So could you please talk about kind of how and really why you started Myna? And I know you also have had some evolution kind of from the beginning. So please touch on that too.
Yeah, thanks, Chelsea. When I was about, I think, like 14, 15 years of age, that's when I had first, I was living in Mumbai, and I had started working in the slums there, was introduced, my school was right next to some of the largest slums in the world called Dharavi. And there, I'd seen so many stories of young girls and women compromising on their health for dignity purposes. So, for instance, women were having laxatives and essentially or like pills to constipate themselves at various times. So just trying to time when they could go to the toilets, just so that it was something that they could do early in the morning and in group setups. So when you're seeing that you're playing with your bodies, but it's because you're trying to do something that is socially acceptable. There's so many things that women are often overlooking and the community as a whole overlooks. So menstrual hygiene was one such issue that was very tangible. It had a clear solution. But for some reason, people were not talking about it, and girls often ignored this concept, and they made do without it. So, if you go and ask a girl, why is she not using sanitary napkins, and she'd often answer, I know about them, because she's living in Mumbai, she's seen TV advertisements, but this is not something that she thinks that she needs to buy. It's a luxury product. So if they have enough income in the house, then they go and get it. But that understanding that it needs to be a needy product will not come by giving her a free napkin. It will really come when she starts to demand that I need this napkin, and no matter what my household budget is, I will try to purchase it. So I think that initially we realized that women were just not asking enough questions about themselves and were not feeling that they were important enough to invest money on. So that understanding that women needed more agency, and they needed to have decision-making power. That was the fundamental problem that we saw. So when we started MENA in 2015 officially, we named ourselves MENA because MENA is the bird that speaks a lot, like Tota Mena we say in India. And MENA also sounds like the Hindi word for Mahila, which is monthly, and we wanted women to talk about their monthlies like a talkative bird. And so that's how we named ourselves, and that's sort of how we want to look at all of the different conditions that we find that women are not speaking up about. So whether it's domestic violence or sexual assault, anything that is holding a woman back, she should be speaking up. That's how we started. We are now at a stage, I think, where we are still growing very much, and we are questioning more things that we need to be giving and providing to our women, and having them on board and them telling us what more they need. But it's really an evolution, as you mentioned.
And you had a pretty significant fundraising bump last year after a certain event. And can you talk a little bit, well, you should share what that was, but you also hopefully can talk a little bit about what do you do when all of a sudden you can do more? And how do you think about kind of prioritizing what to do kind of when there are more resources than you had initially budgeted for?
Right. So we were very fortunate to have Meghan Markle involved with us before she became royal. And so once the royal wedding happened, so as part of the royal wedding, the couple decided to give donations to 7 charities around the world. And we were the only international charity that they'd selected. So we received some donations as part of their royal wedding last year. And we could also actually bring in girls from our slums to the wedding. So these women, for the first time, had ever gotten on a flight. And their first flight was to London and then to Windsor. So it was amazing. We learned a lot from that, and it definitely, as Chelsea was saying, it put us at a different pedestal. So we were just a lot more credible in the eyes of a lot of people that had lots of questions about us, particularly in the Indian context, where as a young girl trying to be a social entrepreneur, I don't think people ever take you seriously. It's just been really challenging in that sense, and I think even now it is, but that really changed a lot of things for us. So we could suddenly say, no, we have the stamp, and we were selected as part of this, so we're a serious organization, and you should take us seriously. So I think that's where it has really helped us, and the way that we're trying to move forward with this is we've received support from people all over the world saying, hey, we want to help you. What can we do from Belgium or from Portugal, but non-monetarily? And then we're like, well, you can speak about us. You can. So I think we're trying to understand how do we really work with the support that we have and this sort of global recognition that we've been able to get, but we are not yet sure how to use to the most, I think, beneficial that it could really be for the organization.
Thank you. And Derrius, I bet you, in many ways, had kind of instant credibility because you were trying to take your story and make it more people's story. Right? You were trying to use kind of what you had figured out and kind of what you had navigated to help make it easier for other people, particularly kind of in the South Side of Chicago, where you're from, to access educational opportunities. And your organization, $1 Million Scholar, I think has a kind of great origin story kind of in you, but also kind of in the thousands of people that you've helped since. So could you talk a little bit about kind of when you decided to kind of take your story and kind of make it an organization effectively, and then kind of how that work has evolved as you realize like what worked for you may work for someone and may not?
Thank you for that. So it really all started from just wanting to give service to my community. When I had the privilege of winning over $1 million in scholarships before I graduated high school, that put me on track to never have to worry about like how I would pay for college. Somebody who's experienced 13 years of foster care, poverty for the entirety of their childhood, that's just such a burden that lifts up off your shoulders. But instantly, it sort of became this thing where I wasn't just thinking about myself. It's like, well, I figured this out for me, but I quickly realized that there are a lot of other youth who did not have this information. And that was the thing that sort of set me up for success, is that I sort of did have a secret. And other people couldn't use it at that same time. And it wasn't a secret that I wanted to keep at myself, because I truly felt that education would be a pathway for me to experience a better life. And I knew that there were so many other youth, not just on the south side of Chicago, but all across the globe, all across this country, who needed that same thing. And so I just started going back to the south side, giving workshops for free at my alma mater, Kenwood Academy High School. And it was really an amazing black woman who came up to me after giving one of these workshops, and she told me, this needs to be a business. Essentially, in the business world, it's like, how do you scale this, is what she was really sort of probing me about. And I hadn't thought about that. It wasn't my intention to even name this thing. It wasn't called $1 Million Scholar at the time. It was just, how to get money for college is essentially the thing. And of course, as soon as you say that, folks are interested. And it was like a room like this. It was standing room only at Kenwood Academy High School. And, she said, you shouldn't be giving this information out for free. And, of course, somebody might argue against that and say, oh, why not? But I truly understood the intention of her words in that moment, of understanding just how valuable what I was sharing and what I was giving to those students, just my time and being there, being present, giving them sort of understanding that it's real. You can pay for college. You can do this. I'm a testament to that. And so it was that impetus that sort of started me on the journey to thinking about how do I turn this into something that can help thousands of people.
Which you've now done.
Indeed.
Oh yeah, please. So, nothing against the four people that are sitting kind of on this side of the stage, but I do think Kristin's probably the only athletic record holder on the stage. Is that fair to say? Unless Ashifi, do you have something you want to share? No. Okay. So. I love sports. I turn into a crazy person during the Olympics and the Paralympics.
So great.
I yelled so much at the television at like midnight during the U.S. men's final in sledge hockey that I literally woke my husband up down the hall. So I am so excited that you're here, and so excited that you have found a life of both sports and service. So could you talk a little bit about kind of how those two are connected, and when you really felt like I need to do both of these things? I need to be like a champion swimmer, and oh yeah, I'm also going to go work in the Obama administration, and kind of where these choices came from and kind of how you've been able to do it.
That's a very great question, and I want to thank you for saying your passion about the Paralympics.
I'm a crazy person. During
I am too.
during the month of the Olympics and the Paralympics, my productivity plummets. I don't sleep, particularly because we keep having Olympics and Paralympics in like other time zones that are very far away from New York City.
We do, yeah.
So thank you for proving what's possible, and I'll just keep thanking you because it is so inspiring to see kind of what our athletes do and kind of push the limit of what's possible. And you have pushed the limit of what's possible in so many different ways, and now I'm going to stop fangirling and let you answer the question.
Thank you so much, and it's a pleasure and honor to be here today and talk about my story and how I came about. And so how I came about into swimming, I wanted to be an Olympic swimmer when I grew up as a kid. And I got involved in swimming when I was about 3 years old for water safety with my sister and I. And at the time, I was fully able-bodied. Able-bodied is a disability term that the disability rights community uses as non-disabled, essentially. And so that's how I got into competing. I thought I was great and awesome, and I was doing about 6 different sports at the time. And then the week of my 9th birthday, I was diagnosed with muscular dystrophy. So it was impacting my legs, my upper arms, and I was not swimming as fast as I used to be when I was 8, 9 years old. So with the competitive and type A personality that I have, I just quit all sports. And I think that's a testament to the representation that we did not have at the time in the United States of the Paralympics and the Paralympic movement. So I quit. I took 6 years off of competing and swimming, and I retaught myself how to swim when I was 15, 16 years old. I was using a walker at the time. My body certainly got weaker in different parts. I set a goal to swim 600 laps in a very, very small pool, maybe like 12 yards. It's small. And I only did that because I wanted to be with my friends. I think that sport is such a great sense of community, and I was the only visibly disabled person in my community at my high school. And I wanted to be with my friends and have that confidence. And I loved the water. So after I retaught myself how to swim, I pitched it to the high school coach at the time. And, you know, I can be on your team. I would love that. I would love to be with my friends. I won't be able to contribute any points at all, but please just let me be on your team. And she said, you have such an incredible drive, and I believe that you should train for the London 2012 Paralympics. And I said, what is that? Because I didn't know. I had no clue. And so, you know, that led me to, I'm probably going to use a lot of water terms, but diving into such a passion of mine that I loved. I absorbed it in every shape and form. And I breathed something that I loved. I ate, cried, and bled everything to get to that point. And so in high school and college, I was on Team USA. I traveled across the country and world for that and broke a slew of records and done half Ironman open ocean swims. with a degenerative condition, and going into the London 2012 Paralympic trials for Team USA, I just missed the cutoff to be considered. I had to be, and wait for it, in a world-class athlete mindset, this is devastating, but what I'm going to say will not sound devastating. I was top 10, I had to be top 10 in the world, and I was 13th. And so I was crushed, and I had no clue what I wanted to do with my life after that. And I think that is a testament to mental health for world-class athletes, whether you're disabled or not, in Paralympic and Olympic movements. And so how I got into swimming was the love of it, and it grew my confidence as to being seen as a full human being in a society where I was questioned and doubted so many times. And so I went as an undergrad, I studied human rights, and whether disability rights are viewed as human rights in a UN context, with the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, specifically Article 30.5 for the right to sport. And there came a point after I retired from swimming as a senior in college of really thinking about what I want to do with that major and what I learned in my background. And I sat and I thought to myself as to, I think it's great, Kristin, that you swim and you've got all these medals and you're staring at a black line a lot, at a pool, but what is that actually doing for society? What am I actually contributing? And I kind of thought that I was shifting into a mindset of getting medals is great, but what systems are I actually contributing to? And I thought about it and I said, I love human rights. I'm a people person. I'm not sure about politics. I'm not sure if it's cynical or not. And I just dove into doing a political internship and just kept following that curiosity and how I'm actually contributing to systems and contributing to systems that I have improved when I'm no longer here on this earth. And I think that swimming helped me feel that and feel that confidence that I am fully capable to do that.
Great. Thank you. And I'm sorry I didn't get to cheer for you in the 2012 Olympics, but I don't think anybody else probably here today is the 13th in the world in any sport. Well, Ashifi, feel free to talk about unknown dimensions of your life. But I do want to come back, Ashifi, particularly because Kristin was just talking about systems. And you, with Sproxil, are really trying to both empower consumers, but also change the system around pharmaceutical safety and product safety more broadly. And you've helped millions of people assess hundreds of millions of products, and yet, I think this is right, still about 30% of drugs in sub-Saharan Africa are fraud. So clearly, that has a devastating consequence. As you just spoke about, kind of the death of babies who were victims of a lack of oversight, a lack of robust systems, and kind of people who couldn't be bothered to care about the consequences of what they were doing and masquerading as being kind of real products and safe products for babies. So could you just talk a little bit about how you do think about scale and how you do think about trying to just push forward to change this overwhelming system, because you've had such tremendous impact, and yet there is so much more work to do. So how do you think about kind of the work ahead? And do you think you need to keep doing just more of the same, or do you also recognize there are things you need to do differently to radically change the system where you're operating in?
So counterfeiting as an overall global industry is $1.7 trillion. It's a huge economy that surpasses the GDP of most countries around the world. And it really is an industry that has devastating impacts, be it counterfeit seeds that rob farmers of their income for a whole year, and takes away the confidence that they have in using modern agricultural practices to improve their livelihood, or counterfeit pharmaceuticals that literally take away lives and have things like rat poison or chemicals found in antifreeze as part of their makeup. It's quite the place you don't want to go. For the last 10 years, I have been working in the supply chain trust field, and the ocean is super wide, and we could actually do with more people coming in to address the problem. It's a complex problem. There are a few instances where consumers actually want to buy counterfeits, in which case no technology will help you. And the $50 luxury bag on the side street of New York, that industry is not going to go away soon. At least technology is not going to solve that problem because people want to buy $50 lookalikes. But in most cases, consumers do not want to get ripped off. And it takes a combination of the private sector working with the public sector to be able to effect change. What we've run into over the last 10 years that makes it difficult to solve this problem is that nobody likes to talk about their product being counterfeited. There's a perception that it will tank your sales and your brand image will take a dip, and it's going to be very tough to get back to where you were before. And so it's a hidden problem that brands do not want to publicly address, and it makes it harder to tackle because it's harder to build a coalition around the story of the devastating impacts that these products are having on consumers. So thinking about the system in order to address this, it's useful to focus on consumer rights and consumer literacy. The more people know, the more they can vote with their dollars, and that has a way of sending a message up to the product manufacturers to do better, to put in more systems to protect the consumers, to work more closely with governments to have enforcement, to clean up the marketplaces, and so on. And so working more as a consumer rights advocate is one of the ways in which we can see ourselves transforming the system rather than playing a specific role in the system as a technology provider today.
And Ashifi, that is counterintuitive, because I would think if I were GlaxoSmithKline, I would not want there to be drugs masquerading as my products that could potentially kill someone or even wouldn't make them better. So have you seen a shift in that mentality in the last decade, or no, that's still a real barrier where kind of big companies just have a kind of look away and ignore strategy?
So GlaxoSmithKline is a great example. They've been a client for almost 10 years now. And as a policy, they adopt, that specific company has adopted to use the technology broadly, especially in Nigeria, across products that there is no mandate for them to protect consumers. That said, companies generally are concerned that if they're the first to go out and say, my products are being counterfeited, hence use this service, the consumer would just indelibly label their products as bad. And nobody wants to be that poster child for bad products. And so what we've done outside the pharmaceutical industry is that we've wrapped our services around a loyalty program, which it's a little bit more difficult due to regulations to do in the pharmaceutical industry. But in the non-pharmaceutical industry, we have tons of loyalty programs that run where you scratch and win. And by scratching and winning, you're verifying a price, you're verifying the product at the point of purchase. And so you're still getting the benefit of authenticity, but then the brands are saying this is a loyalty promotion. And so being able to come up with those kinds of programs that take away the stigma associated with a product being perceived as bad is one way to increase adoption of the services we offer.
It's really interesting. Suhani and Derrius, I want to ask you kind of the same question effectively, which is that you both decided that there would be a fee attached to part of your work, partly so that people would find it valuable, value it, and then be more likely to act on it, whether it was advice about kind of how to think about going to college and paying for college, or kind of how to think about kind of menstrual hygiene products and when to use them and how to use them. Can you talk about kind of really why you made that decision, and do you have a hard time explaining that decision, or do people understand that, yes, this will be more effective and have more impact as a business than just a nonprofit organization?
I think for us, we made a very conscious decision to have sale of products first, and then we also identify certain girls who just cannot afford it, and for them we provide products free of cost for a very short time period, and then encouraging them to then move on. And the reason we had always positioned ourselves as a social enterprise was because of a lot of evidence in research also showing, and our experience on the ground, that people don't value things given for free. And I think that's something that we'd most definitely seen. I was working on toilets for a number of years before that, and every time you provide a toilet free of cost to use, people will, it's dilapidated in like a few years, and people don't really like using it, and they wouldn't mind paying a few rupees to use a toilet per use if they're getting good quality service. So I think similarly with menstrual hygiene products too, we realized that if the product quality is very good, we're able to make it easily accessible to the women. Then if we charge them a fee for it and make them understand the value and importance of it, then they would pay for it. And also I think just in general for an organization's sustainability, it's very challenging to constantly be asking for funds all the time. And so I think over time we need to build our own sustainability methods. And this was one way of doing that. And I think it's easier to go from a business to then having an arm that's also doing, sort of working with the most vulnerable that are providing them free of cost products for a short time period and so on. But it's more difficult, I think, from going from a fully donation-based organization to then starting off some business, because that's when the perceptions start to change. And then the organizations that are donating money are like, well, are you running a business? Because we don't want to be funding a business. We want to be funding a social impact organization. And in India, we have a lot of challenges in reaching out to donors. For them, there's a very stark difference between what a business is and what an NGO does. So either you're an NGO and you just receive donations, or you're a business and then you don't position yourself as social impact oriented at all. So in that, in between, we have to be like, no, we're generating revenue for our own sustainability, but for creating social impact, we need money. And I think that's where we're really positioning ourselves now.
Derrius, could you answer the same question?
So for us, our thinking from the very beginning was that we wanted to offset costs for the student. So we're working with the student. That's who we're most concerned with. And we don't want them to pay anything. So the students don't pay anything for our services. We partner with schools and parents. So on a parent basis, it'll generally one-to-one is a relationship. And then schools, we're partnering with them and working with a population of their students. That could be their entire school. That could be a section of their school. That could be a vulnerable population within their school that they've specifically identified as at risk or potentially sort of having a great potential. So they specifically want us to work with them. And so that model, from the very beginning, we sort of identified that as providing both feasibility for our business model, but also something to where it's not something where we're selling to children. And so that, that sort of balance was something that we were able to reach.
And people understand the difference?
I think definitely. And I think what's different about us, if there is anything, is that college is becoming so expensive. It's a problem that's at the mind of a lot of parents in particular. So even if the parents, aren't, willing to pay out of their own pocket, they're definitely willing to be advocates to the school to say, you all need to bring $1 Million Scholar in, right? We want what they have to offer. And so is there a way that you all can offset the cost of bringing them in? So,
Kristin, I know you've spoken about really eloquently the need to have more visibility of the kind of 1 billion people on planet Earth that the WHO estimates are living with disabilities. And that, yes, the Paralympic movement has been hugely important, and yet visibility needs to extend well beyond that. Can you talk a little bit about kind of what you're doing to try to change that? Because I think about Sally Ride a lot. It's hard to imagine what you can't see. And so to help make kind of not only Americans, but really people all over the world kind of with living with disabilities more visible to one another, but also to the 85% of the world that is able-bodied.
Right. I think it goes to my philosophy, because I did start a project that led me to CGIU when I was a senior in undergrad. And I, at the time, just didn't, it just didn't take off. And so I have taken that philosophy of seeing disability as a human experience. There's being disabled and in a social identity, that it's not a means necessarily to be cured for you to fully contribute and be worthy in this world. First and foremost, you're born worthy. Second, I have thought to myself when I recently had to stop walking, how are my contributions different if I'm sitting or standing? How I'm contributing to this world and our systems? It's not. So, and going back to representation, I think it's huge that we have visible and non-visible persons with disabilities in a plethora of roles. And so what I would say to that is a few things that I would love to happen in our society is, first and foremost, it would be incredible to have almost like a Forbes 30 under 30 of persons with disabilities that are incredibly successful in a plethora of sectors because it's out there and a major magazine or outlet to do that. And then second, as a Paralympic athlete, when you travel from the US to another country, the media representation is way beyond where we are here in the United States. You are treated as an Olympic athlete. I was like signing autographs. I had cameras in my face before I swam. And when I came back here to the United States, people were asking, are you doing the Special Olympics? Which is, it's still incredible, but it's very different. And so we need more media representation of our disabled athletes and the narratives itself of not actually overcoming being disabled. We're overcoming societal barriers and the lack of representation. So we need to have the same amount of media coverage from MVC of the Olympics just as Paralympics. And then the last thing I would say to that is that we need to hire disabled actors for disabled roles. The talent is out there, and we no longer need to have able-bodied actors playing disabled roles if you see disability in a social context. And what I would just lastly say to that is I don't know how my life would be different, but when I was 13 and not doing any sports, I was watching the 2004 Olympic Games and just wishing and praying that I could be there on Team USA and swimming and doing that and racing against incredible athletes. And I had no hope at the time because I never saw that. And I had an incredible experience of 7 years later being the captain of Team USA, swimming in that exact pool that I used to watch on my TV screen out in Greece when I was 13 years old, right? Like, we have the power to do that. And I think we all have the responsibility to having these conversations, whether a disabled person is in the room or not, because it's a human experience.
Amen. Kristin, you spoke about kind of not making the Olympic team and how devastating that was for you, and yet also really galvanizing for you. I wonder, Derrius, we can start with you and then kind of go down the row. If you could talk about what you learned from your failures. Feel free to also confess on your Olympic miss. But even if it wasn't kind of that, like, what have you done? What have you worked really hard for that didn't work, but then helped you get closer to something else that would work next time?
A big learning that I've constantly had to reflect back on is the fact that physically, it's impossible for me to be in two places simultaneously. And so sort of really thinking deeply about what it means to be in the present moment. Like, I'm here now, and I'm here, and I'm truly here with you all. I literally left my phone back there, not because I was told to, but consciously thinking it will be a better experience if I'm not here, like fidgeting with my phone and thinking about emails and what I have to do when I'm leaving here, or what I could be responding to in this moment. And interestingly enough, a big example of that, a big failure, happened in a situation with your father, actually. I had the opportunity to get a photo with President Clinton. And, you know, this was huge for me at 21 years old at the time, so years ago. And so it was a big thing on my docket. But earlier in the year, I had committed to signing up to speak to a group of youth at my old high school. And, you know, those two things came into conflict with one another. And I knew it was a conflict from the very beginning, but in my mind, I just thought, you know, I'm gonna, you know, quickly jump in, get this photo, and then I'll just make my way over to the youth, and everything will work itself out. It did not at all. And it was something where, you know, I quickly came to realize that really the only way for me to have worked this out is I was gonna have to choose between these two. And in that situation, I made the commitment to speak to the children first. And as much as I, you know, wanted that photo with President Clinton in that moment, it would have been best for me to turn that down and just be okay with that. But I was not in that moment. But now I have the maturity to understand that. But they were significantly disappointed. Like the level of disappointment, I was like, but I'm not, anytime I come here, and I do actually show up, it's not like I'm show up to fanfare or anything, but when I don't show up, and I guess that's a lesson as well, like when you do show up, nobody cares, but when you don't show up, everybody cares, right? And so in that moment of not showing up, you know, people were like, where were you? And we were waiting and everybody's angry, and I'm just like, I'm that important, huh? Like, so, but in that thing, I think, it's sort of the lesson I'm really trying to get at full circle for all of us is, I think particularly as social entrepreneurs, we're just often pulled in a multitude of directions at the same exact time, concurrently. And it can be hard. You really do want to serve everybody. You want to give your all to everyone who's calling on you. But I think a question we all have to come back to at any given moment in time is, what's most important for me right now? Because you can really only have one most important thing at any given moment in time. You can't have two most important things, or else it's not most important, right? Mm-hmm. So sort of going back to that question, that's a big lesson, and I failed in that way many of times, just really sort of assuming from just a best intention standpoint that I can do all of these things simultaneously, when in reality I cannot. So being humble enough to just lean into that and be okay with that. And turn down the picture with President Clinton if you must have to.
Yeah. Well, he would have said you made the right decision. And you know, listening to you, Derrius, reminds me of my grandma Ginger, my dad's mom, had just like so many wonderful sayings, and so did her group of friends in Hot Springs. And I would often go and spend the weekend with her, and it was always the same, like. The same thing happened on Saturday. On Sunday, we went to church, and then after Sunday, we would meet her friends for brunch. And she had one friend who had this great saying, like, reach for the stars, and at least maybe you'll hit the mountaintops, which I've always really liked. But she had this other saying that she didn't believe in going to church, but she did believe in the ministry of showing up. And I think about that a lot, like the ministry of showing up, the ministry of being present when you're present. Could you answer the same question?
Yeah, I think this is so true. I think everything that you said, I definitely feel like that as well. I think one of the failures that I'd like to talk about is to do with teams and building teams. We've particularly struggled with this at MENA. We started off as an organization by the women in the slums, for the women in the slums, and we want to create quality products, be a sustainable business that's homegrown from the slums and is hiring people from outside later on. And that's the dream, that we're not coming in from outside and employing women here, but we are getting women here to be the entrepreneurs and then employing people from outside too if needed. And with that in mind, we were so passionate about, you know, empowering our own women that we were employing, that we kind of, I think, got lost in like thinking about growth and scale and sustainability and how that would look like if the organization is entirely run by women who are doing this for themselves, but might not necessarily be thinking about, let's get to, you know, 15 slums in the next 2 years, or, you know, like the entire vision and strategy, everything was becoming the onus of the women that might not have ever gone to school, which was very much the whole point of this. But I think we needed direction and guidance as well, which could have also come in from outside, but more as an enabler for the women to do their jobs better. And I think we had a late realization on that. And so I think over the last few years, we are still almost 95% staffed by women from the slums across all roles, from accounting to management operations, sales, marketing, everything is done by the women. But we do have people now that are coming in with some sort of background in a particular skill set. So like our finance manager is somebody who actually comes from the finance sector and is able to manage our documents well, because we actually didn't have really well documented things before, because we were managing it in a very ad hoc way. So I think that that's been a challenge for us. And then once these two different types of people come together in the same team, managing that hierarchy where you try to ensure that there is no hierarchy, and if anything, the women who this is really for are the owners and they are the ones making the final decisions. It needs to be okay with the people that are coming from outside, and that's something that we've also found that people are not okay with. And so having good, skilled people that are talented, working on these complex challenges of poverty on the ground, that are equally passionate about it and are willing to take decisions from the women in the communities, I think that's been really challenging to find and build a team around. So I think that that's something that we have definitely failed at before, but I think now we are getting a little bit more understanding of what we need. We were also only women initially, and we were very, very hell-bent on being an only women team that's working on these women challenges, because that's how we're building this community, and women are so comfortable coming up to us and talking to us because it's an only women setup. I mean, just an example is we work predominantly in Muslim communities where Muslim women would wear their burqas and cover their faces when they work with us. But now that they see that, initially when they saw that there are no men around, they would start removing their burqas. And then that got them more comfortable to remove their burqas now while even walking around the area, and became more comfortable in front of other men too. But it slowly happened, and it started off with having this only women space that doesn't exist anywhere else. But now I think we're even opening that up a little bit and being like, okay, let's have this only women's space, but let's employ men too. As we were getting husbands of the women that we employed, or the brothers of the women that we employed, really interested, and they were going and talking about sanitary napkins and periods to other women. So I think we have now tried to broaden our scope, and that's made it a lot more comfortable to have this sort of team building set up. But overall, I think that maneuvering that team has been challenging for us.
Ashifi?
So we've had a reach for the stars type moment, but it showed up as FOMO, fear of missing out. And we just wanted to boil the ocean, and anywhere there's a speck of counterfeiting, we'll just go right in and take it out. And what we've realized over the years is our business model doesn't work for small countries. If the country doesn't have 50 million or more people, we fail. And we learned that the hard way. We set up an office in Mali, for example, that does not have 50 million people. And we had a great time visiting and seeing all the cultures. A fascinating country. But after 3 years, we had no sales to show, and we had to shut it down. And so being able to focus, being able to know when it's okay to let go, and when to prune the efforts that you're undertaking in order to be able to be more sustainable is very, very hard to do, because you feel like you're leaving impact on the table, right? There are counterfeit products in Mali. There was a big incident where fertilizer was counterfeited, and the government had put a lot of effort to educate farmers to use fertilizer the right way. And now, what are you going to do when people accuse the government of misinforming the farmers because the information they gave did not match up with the results that they saw? It's a problem we could have solved, but we didn't have a business model to match. And so it's hard. It's hard to know that you're not delivering impact to some people, but at the same time, it's not very useful to continue to pursue a problem that you don't have a good solution for.
In our last few minutes, I just would like to open the floor and ask each of you kind of what you would want to share as a final thought, a closing thought, or even just a next thought? Kind of what have we not talked about that you kind of want all of us to hear?
I think, to me, failure is only when I am so wrapped up in my own head and fear and doubt that I don't even try. And I think that everyone in this room and also CGIU, it's so action-oriented. But remembering that my actions are worth something, regardless also that we live in a society that's very accomplished based, and it's okay to rest. It's okay to take a break, and it's okay to not have answers right immediately. And I just want to thank you all for coming out today, and you all are incredible people.
The biggest thing, young entrepreneurs, so I would say anybody under 25, most 25, but I just get this a lot, and it's related to the concept of imposter syndrome. And, Derrius, how do you step in environments and feel like, you're just deserving to be there? And sort of my very quick message is, because I deserve to be there. And for all of us in this room, I just hope you all understand, no matter what your role here was today, speaker, winning an award today, just attendee, you're deserving of this. And as you step out into the room to create your impact, go back to your communities, really lean into that, and understanding that this is not coincidental. Nobody put you here, nobody gave you this. You came and you took this, you seized this. And the opportunity was presented to you, but you took advantage of it. And so understand that you are deserving of that. And don't doubt that. Have faith in that.
I think something that I've learned, which I think that definitely a lot of you here have probably already done, but was difficult for me initially, was to understand how to let go of power in your own organization and really just try to develop the next generation of leaders. And that's at every level, but constantly making sure that sustainability comes from maybe your own beneficiaries who are becoming the next generation of people, but you're constantly inspiring and making sure that your presence doesn't matter in that organization, and everything can function as well without it. You're just there to help think about new things and new ideas. But that really means not micromanaging, not really making sure that everything is going exactly the way you had planned it, but that the way the organization should really be functioning for its own good and its own sustainability.
When we read of stories of people who have created impact, it might be our shortening attention span, but it does make it feel like it's an instant success. And some of these things that we're working on have been decades in the making in some cases. And so it's useful to be able to pace yourself as you pursue these large commitments that you've made, to understand that you're dedicating a significant portion of your life to the work that lies ahead of you, and measure your success over a long span of time, rather than perhaps feeling that something big needs to happen tomorrow, right? And so make time your friend, pace yourself. It's more of a marathon than a sprint, but the journey is so enjoyable if you really are dedicated to what you're doing. That time will pass in a gentle way, and you'll be able to look back and feel proud of what you've accomplished.
Well, I am incredibly proud and grateful to have shared the stage with all of you today. And I'm also really proud and grateful that we just ran out of time. So well done, us. And really, thank you all for being with us. And just please give maybe your loudest applause yet for all of our panelists. Thank you very much.